Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. With over 64,000 Palestinians dead and no end in sight, the war in Gaza has reached a devastating milestone. What happens next in this deadly stalemate? This is the debate, where we delve into the most pressing issues of our time with expert analysis and respectful, rigorous exchange. Today we're confronting a critical question. Given the current devastating milestones and the stated, incompatible demands from both sides, what credible path forward really exists to resolve this deadly stalemate in Gaza? My view is that the current Israeli strategy, rooted in achieving essential security objectives and disarming Hamas, is, frankly, a necessary, albeit profoundly costly approach to navigate this intractable conflict.
And I offer a different perspective. While fully acknowledging the immense complexity, I contend that the catastrophic humanitarian costs, coupled with the continued expansion of Israeli control, fundamentally necessitates a shift in strategy. A sustainable path forward, from my viewpoint, it must prioritize an immediate and lasting ceasefire and actively address the underlying Palestinian demands, moving beyond what appears to be a military-centric approach that, honestly, only deepens the crisis.
It's crucial to begin by recognizing the tragic loss of life on all sides of this conflict, of course. However, the ongoing Israeli operations in Gaza are, from a strategic standpoint, a direct and, I would argue, necessary response to the brutal October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas. That day, approximately 1,200 people were killed, primarily civilians, and 251 individuals were abducted. For Israel, its core demands for ending the fighting are clear, and from its security doctrine, they're non-negotiable. The unconditional return of all hostages, the complete disarmament of Hamas, and full security control of the territory to prevent future attacks, with civilian administration delegated to others. This isn't just about tactical gains, It's about altering the fundamental security landscape. As Brig Gen Effie Defrin, the Israeli military spokesman, has indicated, Israeli forces now control 40% of Gaza City and plan to expand operations. This isn't merely about holding ground. It signifies a strategic objective to dismantle Hamas's operational capabilities within urban strongholds, including its vast tunnel network and command centers. Conversely, Hamas's demands, which include a lasting ceasefire, full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, opening borders and reconstruction, all while holding 48 remaining hostages, 20 of whom Israel believes are still alive, represent a position fundamentally incompatible with Israel's security imperatives. These demands, from the Israeli perspective, would allow Hamas to regroup and rearm, essentially setting the stage for another October 7th. Israel maintains that many civilian deaths are tragically attributable to Hamas's deliberate strategy of entrenching its military infrastructure within densely populated civilian areas.
Okay, I understand the imperative of security, particularly in the wake of such a horrific attack. I do. However, that perspective, while vital, must be balanced against the overwhelming human catastrophe unfolding, which I believe is the central and most urgent issue here. We are nearly 2 years into this conflict, with the reported death toll soaring past 64,000 Palestinians. And heartbreakingly, women and children constitute around half of these fatalities. Just recently, we saw the tragic example of 28 people killed overnight, mostly women and children, including a 10-day-old baby, in strikes on tents housing displaced people in famine-stricken Gaza City. The accounts are just devastating. Maha Afana, a resident, described finding her son and daughter drenched with blood. Hayam Basus powerfully questioned, what did those children do to the state of Israel? They didn't carry a knife or artillery. They were just sleeping. This speaks to a profound failure, I think, to adequately distinguish between militants and civilians, regardless of intent, which simply fuels endless cycles of violence. Beyond the immediate deaths, the conditions are dire. Overcrowding in displacement camps across southern Gaza is worsening by the day, and residents face immense difficulties, trapped after northern Gaza and Gaza City were declared combat zones. Furthermore, Israel's continued military expansion and the establishment of new settlements, such as the one in the heart of Hebron reported by Peace Now, described chillingly as the ugliest face of Israeli control and apartheid, actively undermine any credible path to peace. These actions don't resolve the conflict. They entrench it further, creating facts on the ground that make a future Palestinian state, and thus true peace, increasingly unattainable. The international community, including the Vatican, which has consistently insisted on a two-state solution, overwhelmingly views these settlements as illegal under international law, specifically the Fourth Geneva Convention, and as a major obstacle to peace. It's also worth noting that Hamas has expressed a willingness to release all 48 remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, a lasting ceasefire, Israeli withdrawal, border opening, and reconstruction. Dismissing such offers out of hand, I would argue, only serve to perpetuate the very stalemate we're trying to resolve.
I appreciate the profound concern for human life, which is certainly shared. However, framing this situation simply as a stalemate in the conventional sense might be an oversimplification of the strategic reality. From Israel's vantage point, the military operation, despite its tragic cost, is a dynamic process actively aimed at weakening Hamas's capabilities and establishing necessary security control, fundamentally altering the security calculus. Brig Gen Effie Differin's statements are not just about territorial control. They point to a systematic effort to degrade Hamas's command and control, its rocket capabilities, and its extensive underground infrastructure in key urban centers. This isn't an impasse where nothing is changing. It's a necessary, albeit difficult phase in achieving Israel's fundamental security goals.
Historically, military pressure has often been a precondition for creating a situation where negotiations become possible, especially when dealing with non-state actors deeply embedded within a population. The stalemate persists, arguably, because Hamas continues its refusal to disarm and release all hostages unconditionally, thereby compelling Israel to maintain military pressure as a regrettable necessity to protect its citizens and prevent a recurrence of October 7.
I must challenge that interpretation of stalemate quite directly. To label this anything other than a devastating, deeply entrenched stalemate, particularly from the perspective of the population enduring it, I think misses the critical point entirely. The current military strategy, despite claims of control over significant portions of Gaza City, is undeniably creating a catastrophic humanitarian situation and, in the long run, deepening resentment. The reported 64,000-plus deaths and the recent instance of 28 fatalities, including so many women and children in displaced persons tents, that's stark evidence that the approach is failing to distinguish effectively between militants and civilians, or at least that the scale of civilian harm is so immense it undermines any strategic gains. Military advances, if they can even be called that amidst such suffering, are being severely offset by human devastation and a complete absence of a credible political resolution. Historically, military occupations or control over urban areas, when unaccompanied by a viable political horizon, often lead to protracted insurgencies and resistance, not lasting security. This is a long-term, unsustainable stalemate, where military actions only fuel the cycle of violence, radicalization, and suffering, making any true peace more elusive.
That's an interesting analysis, though. I would frame the discussion about incompatible demands and negotiated solutions quite differently. As we know, previous ceasefire talks broke down last month, and U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff explicitly attributed that failure to Hamas. Any comprehensive deal, from Israel's perspective, must absolutely address its non-negotiable demands, the return of all hostages, the complete disarmament of Hamas, and full security control. These aren't maximalist bargaining chips, they are existential security requirements. Hamas's current demands, particularly for a full Israeli withdrawal without disarmament, are, in my view, strategically designed to preserve its power, maintain its military capabilities, and essentially win the war politically after absorbing military losses. This fundamentally undermines any prospect for Israeli security and makes genuine agreement incredibly difficult because there's a deep ideological chasm. Not just differing negotiating positions. It's not just a matter of differing demands, but of conflicting visions for the future of the region that are truly incompatible from Israel's security perspective.
Well, I come at it from a different angle, suggesting that framing incompatible demands as solely Hamas's fault overlooks some critical details and perhaps places too much onus on one side. While the U.S. envoy's statement is noted, it's also been reported that Hamas did accept a proposal that both it and Arab mediators claimed was almost identical to an earlier one that Israel had at one point accepted. Yet, despite this, there has been no public indication that substantive talks have resumed or progressed. This raises a crucial question. Is Israel's absolute insistence on full security control, a term that often translates to indefinite military presence and significant political leverage, and its outright dismissal of Hamas's offers as mere spin, inadvertently preventing genuine diplomatic progress, especially when you juxtapose that with the ongoing humanitarian crisis and the desperate urgency of freeing the remaining hostages? The international community, as evidenced by the Vatican's consistent call for a two-state solution, understands that a broader, more flexible framework is needed to bridge these so-called incompatible demands and move beyond this deadly impasse. It seems that a refusal to genuinely engage with the stated positions of the other side, however unpalatable, simply prolongs the suffering.
I see why you might think that, but my perspective on the long-term consequences and the path to peace remains firmly rooted in the necessity of eradicating Hamas's military and governance capabilities. This is paramount for any future stability and for the safety of the entire region. Without achieving this foundational security objective, any peace would, from the Israeli viewpoint, be temporary and inherently vulnerable to renewed attacks, a tragic reality starkly demonstrated on October 7th. The current focus, therefore, is on creating conditions for sustainable security that will in turn allow for a different, demilitarized civilian administration in Gaza, effectively preventing a return to the pre-October 7 status quo where Hamas could regroup and rearm with impunity. This isn't about perpetual occupation, but about creating the absolute preconditions for a truly lasting peace, a secure environment from which political solutions might eventually emerge.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning as a viable path to peace. My concern is that the continued military actions, especially the expansion of control within Gaza City, and, perhaps even more problematically, the establishment of new settlements in the West Bank, like the one in Hebron, which Peace now described as aiming to seize new areas of the city and displace Palestinians from them, are actively undermining the very prospect of a future Palestinian state. This, in turn, fosters long-term instability rather than security. Ignoring the immense humanitarian disaster in Gaza and the international consensus that these settlements are illegal and a direct impediment to peace, well, it creates a self-perpetuating cycle of violence, resentment, and a profound sense of injustice. How does the strategic gain of military control reconcile with the devastating political cost of alienating an entire population and dismantling the very idea of a viable future state? This push for control and expansion makes true, durable peace more distant, not closer.
While the current conflict is undeniably devastating, and the human cost is immense, the path forward, as I interpret the strategic imperatives, must prioritize security against threats like Hamas. Ensuring lasting safety for Israel is, unfortunately, a prerequisite for any broader regional stability, and for creating conditions where a different civilian administration in Gaza can eventually emerge and truly thrive without the threat of terrorism.
Whereas a durable resolution, in my view, absolutely requires an immediate prioritization of alleviating the immense human suffering and actively addressing the root causes and conditions that perpetuate this conflict. This includes the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the deeply problematic, destabilizing impact of ongoing settlement expansion in the West Bank.
We both acknowledge the immense suffering and the undeniable complexity of this situation. Our core disagreement, however, remains centered on the strategic approach to breaking this deadly stalemate.
Indeed. Whether security must first be established primarily through military means, or whether addressing the profound humanitarian needs and fundamental political demands must proceed or run concurrently with security efforts to avoid further entrenchment in a longer cycle of violence, that really is the crux of the matter.
This discussion, it highlights that understanding the next steps in this deadly stalemate requires careful consideration of both immediate security imperatives and the profound long-term humanitarian and political consequences of every action. We invite our listeners to critically evaluate the presented evidence and form their own nuanced conclusions from the source material.
Thank you for joining us on this important discussion.
Thank you for your time and participation. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Global WarWatch Network.
And do share your thoughts in the comments section. You can also join us on social media. All the links are provided in the description.